Music.
Sounds like you're on mute, Jeff. No sound coming on your end. So, welcome to Junior Hockey Live. We've got for the first time ever, a Jeff Colson without any sound, and we don't get to hear his voice, thankfully. So, this may be our best podcast yet. Again, I'm Mike Bloom. We got Jeff Colson working on some of the technical difficulties. But one of the things we wanted to talk about today was a couple different things. But, over the past week, we had the All American Biosteel, which is a huge event for the future draft players of this year. They get together and they basically split them up into hopefully two equal teams and go against each other for all the scouts and different colleges if these kids aren't already committed and things for them to see.
Boring.
And then, hey, we got them. But the other big thing that we wanted to talk about too is the midterm NHL Central Scouting list came out.
That's interesting. That's interesting. But we'll talk about that other All-Star game too if you want to.
You like the All-Star games?
No, I don't. It's shirts and skins. You take the National Development Program and you go, skins over there, shirts over there. Let's throw a couple other USPH or USHL guys in here and let's play. I mean, you see this. All you got to do is go watch well, I guess the guys on the bottom of the guys that don't get special team time get a little more time in this game for the development program. But come on, this is showcasing one program. Now it is our best program, but you can go to their practice, you can go to their games and see the same thing. So no, I'm not a big fan of this. I think there's too much that high level kids already at that level pressure they have on them, and it's just another added pressure. I guess it's like this in every sport though. If you're a high level football player, you're doing these kind of reveals. If you're doing any kind of showcases for basketball, you're doing the same thing. So it is what it is, but I'm not a fan. I don't see anything new in this that there's nobody that comes out of this where you go, wow, did you see that? There's some good highlights, but nobody's going to really hit. Nobody's going out there to go 100% and dive in front of shots because they got a regular season to finish.
It's more for NHL scouts to kind of see who the guys are in the first and second, maybe even third rounds, and get a better read on seeing them go against each other than it really is anything else.
I fully agree with that because there are some NHL programs that they rely very little on these. We're going to talk about the Central Scouting list. They don't rely on the Central Scouting list. They go out and do it themselves. So it does put these kids all in the same place that are NHL eligible. But if it was real, why wouldn't they have the all the North American leagues in there? Yeah, we've only got a few guys in the NOL that are draft eligible, but there are some guys in the NOL. There's some BCHL guys. There's some AJHL guys, and even if it expanded into 2 games, why don't you put them all under one roof so you can see everything going on? I just not a fan. Not a
Well, they
fan.
kind of do that at the scouting combine, and
Well, that's a different event though. I'm talking about
yeah,
this event. This highly publicized, over-sponsored event that draws a lot of attention and a lot of money into the coffers of USA Hockey. There, I said it.
yeah, I know you have that that little chip on your shoulder when it comes to that, but
I don't know
you
if it's
know,
a chip. I just think that, come on. These kids, is there any new name on this list of players? I
no,
just,
but I don't think you're looking for new names. I think you're just looking to see how these kids compete against each other. Because to your point, most of these kids are development kids, so they're typically going against other teams, other countries and other USHL teams and things like that. And then now you have the best of the other USHL kids that are kind of getting mixed in together, and they're getting put in different situations. So you get the opportunity to at least see some other things than, I'm not going to say a person's name, but XYZ guy is on the 4th line for the
yeah,
national team
yeah,
development
I
program.
get it. I hear what you're saying. I don't know if I agree with you, but I hear you.
You don't have to. That's not what we need. We don't need. I don't need you on my side. That's for sure.
You're right. You're right. Man, oh man, my background looks really goofy tonight, doesn't it?
I
I
just
got
can't get past the huge thing that's in front of your background. That's all.
yeah, that's called class and good looks. There. Now I got a little bit of a better background going. So anyway, Jeff Colson here. Mike did a commendable job of introducing things. Thank you to the people that are on. We've actually got a pretty good sized audience considering we came out a little early tonight. That's because somebody, not me, but somebody has to run a practice. And so they
Nope, a
think that,
game. We got a
oh,
game,
you
big
got a
time.
game. Oh, assistant coaches aren't good enough to run a team when you've got real work to do.
That's right.
You can't turn it over. And I forget. You get the big bucks. You're actually paid, so you got to be there. Hope I didn't let that. That's not.
I want to be there, is what you meant to say.
That's what I meant to say. Is that you want to be there? You definitely want to be there. Okay.
That's right.
So a couple things. If you want to comment, please comment. Tell us where you're at. Tell us what your thoughts are. What you want to talk about. Remember, this is not the other Junior Hockey Advisor podcast. This one is literally just talking about juniors, coaches, players, leagues, teams, and we're not talking about the evaluation process of individual players looking to move up from 16s and 18s. We're literally talking about the leagues themselves, the players themselves, and how this works for juniors. So good to see Frank on. Frank, good to have you. TM, good to see you. Thanks for coming on. We've got some. Oh, now they're scrolling in. Very good. We're picking up a good audience, and we've got people actually commenting. So you notice
great.
when I was muted, there was 0 audience, and then as soon as the mic came on, boom! It just
Is
went
that what happened?
boom like that.
I wouldn't know because you got all the controls on your side.
Well, you're right. So, excuse me. I do. Mike thinks I'm coming off my 4th case of COVID in the last 2 months, but uh, I'm on the road a lot, and I was on the road this weekend in Ann Arbor. Mike, you were on the road in Michigan too. We're about an hour and a half apart, so we didn't really, thank God, have to see each other. But cold, wet, lots of travel. Man, oh man, am I susceptible to that kind of stuff? Seems like I always get hit with this stuff. So, hey, it is what it is. It's part of the job, eh? So
That's right.
it's also
It's
good
not
hockey.
easy when you're in a cold ice rink.
I should say I saw some hockey this weekend. I'm going to leave it at that. There are teams that play well when you come out and watch them, and there's and some teams don't. And this was a matter of I didn't see the best of all hockey this weekend, but you got to see good and bad. Now there were some good players, there were some teams that were looking good, but overall, I would give this a B minus C plus weekend for the scouting. I didn't walk out of there overwhelmed. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way.
So when you're in their scouting teams, whether it's this weekend or any weekend, how much weight do you put in the
About
actual
300
team?
pounds.
How much weight do you put into the team structure and the players doing, repeatable things that you might be able to see from a team standpoint,
Yeah.
not necessarily an individual
Yeah.
standpoint?
So if I know the coach or I know the program and I've watched them evolve over the year, that's very, very noticeable. If I know a team runs some kind of a system collapse into the corner or a man on man system or, they play a box and one, it doesn't matter. I mean, some of the stuff, you don't see much except for teams that just aren't coached at the same higher level. But you do see it. You see some coaches that don't put much effort into D zones at all. So you watch players struggle all year long that if they were on a team with a little more structure, probably could flourish on those things and could actually improve and be ready for juniors. So when I'm out there watching this stuff, um, I do put weight into it in situations where I know more about the program and I know more about the coach, his background, how he coaches, and most of the Detroit programs, the HPHLs, the independents, the Tier 1 elites, and I'm talking about the Bells and the Honeybakes, Little Caesars, CompUWare. Most of those programs, I know how each of those coaches work, so it's very easy for me to go, oh, okay, the kid's getting it, he's picking it up, or he's just lost out there in a system that a coach wants. So those are easy. And it's the teams I don't see very often. Then I'm just looking at the skill base and for hockey sense, and just basically looking to see how the kid, how he moves around the ice, what he's looking at, where he's looking, and then if I don't know the system, a lot of times I'll either try to get behind the bench where I'm in earshot, or I'll just watch what kind of conversation he's having with the coach when he comes to the bench, and if the coach is pointing to certain parts of the ice or getting the whiteboard out, I'm trying to pick out as much as I can from that too. So I'm sure you do something similar, but that's the way I go about it.
Yeah, I pretty much similar to what you're doing, and it's one of those things where I hate watching games at the very beginning of the year because it's still spring hockey and it's a lot of individual play and one-on-ones and guys trying to do way too much, and then as the season comes along, teams start settling in. Not only defensively are they taking away more space, and then a player has a little bit more resistance coming through, but it's nice to see if they understand how to play the game with the other four guys on the ice with them and against the other five that they're playing against, or if they're just going 1-on-5. And
Yep.
even if they're really talented, do they understand or see the other players on the ice? And I kind of asked that question because it alludes to just the scouting process that I think these NHL guys have to go through watching that Biosteel game, because there's very little defense that's played in that game. There's probably minimal structure. It's more, schemes that they're kind of feeding off each other for and
Yeah,
whatnot.
yeah.
And in a lot of cases, it's hard to see what you're supposed to see other than
And you
just
got the D
how
carrying the
talented
puck
they
more
are.
than they normally would. You got guys that are carrying the puck out versus getting the puck up quick, and sometimes it means a little bit more selfishness. Sometimes it means some bad plays on the back end. I mean, overall it was fun to watch. He had 9 goals in the game. It was 6-3 game, but
Yeah.
one of the things while we're on the topic of just scouting in general, uh, you know, I had a parent sitting 2 rows behind me, a couple rows up, 10 feet apart away from me this weekend. And I'm just sitting there. I just popped into this one game for a little bit, and a kid scored, and it was clearly their team that scored, these parents that were behind me. And I'm sure the lady knew I was there scouting because she immediately got up. She didn't ask any of the other parents, got up, walked down towards me and said, "Did you see who scored?" And I went, "No." And she went, "Oh." And then she proceeded to tell me who scored, which was interesting because why would you come down and ask me who scored? And I said, I don't watch the puck. And that's one of the things when you get a little more advanced in scouting is I'm not watching like a fan. I might have picked out a left D or a right wing, and I'm watching everything they do with or without the puck. And they're
Right.
telling me where the puck is because of where they're positioned, where their eyes are at, and how they're reacting with their body. And so when she said that, I just said, I don't watch the game like a fan. I don't watch the puck. And she went, oh, and kind of, prissy all went back and sat down. And I could hear her talking to other parents. Well, he doesn't even watch the puck. I don't know what he's doing over there. And it just made me laugh because I'm thinking 95% of the guys that do this aren't watching the puck like a fan. They're not watching
Right.
to see, oh, here he comes. What is he going to do with it? Unless that's the kid you're watching. Most of the time I'm looking away from it to see what's developing. I can watch away from the puck and see 4, 5, 6 guys and know exactly what's going on with the puck, but not
Right.
have to watch the puck. If you watch the puck, you tend to watch that player and watch everything that player's doing. If you look away from the ice, you can see where angles are at, where sticks are at, where body positioning is at, and what's opening up. And oh, that kid's opening up. Does the other guy pick? There's just a lot more strategy on the backside versus watching the puck all the time. So, little hint out there: if you're in the stands and you see a scout, and you go over there and try to pump up your player by asking the other guy if he saw the goal, he's probably going to tell you something similar to me, or he might actually know who your son is and just go, oh, okay, and just kind of take that little thing and scratch it off there. I'm not saying that'll happen, but anyway, all right. You want anything else to say on the Biosteel game? Do you want to get into stats at all?
I mean, if you want to, just look at some of the players who had scored or whatnot, I think, Will Smith is probably the highest rated player on the national team development program. He had, I think, 2 goals in that game. He definitely is a difference maker. He looks like he's got the body type too, to where he's going to be a little bit of a more of like I don't want to say Matt Boldy because they're different players. One's a wing, one's a center. But he's got that body type where he's going to be a little bit of a different player than, typically the national team development guys that are, a little wiry and, real handsy and, like the Zegrises and the Hughes and those guys. He's a little bit of a different player, but he kind of reminds me, I'm trying to think of a good comparable for him. Maybe like a Dylan Larkin, who's more of like a 200-foot player, just kind of heavy, but, has all the skill you can need. But one's right, one's left. But, he was fun to watch just because I like that style of player that's a little bit heavier. You can't really bump him around. Um, there's another U.S. player, that Charlie Strammel, who wasn't in this game, but he was obviously on the U.S. team at the U20. He's another U.S. player that's like a big body, like a James Van Riemsdyk. I like that we're starting to get some of those guys back into the game instead of, all just small skill, good edge type players. We need a little mix of, some bigger bodies in there too that can
6'3",
play.
212, University of
Yeah.
Wisconsin kid. He's a big boy. So, hey,
Yeah,
look,
he's a
I
big
see a lot
boy.
of questions coming in. We'll get to your questions a little bit. Let us talk a little bit about the 2 topics. Then we'll spend a little time delving into some of the issues you guys have brought up, and I appreciate it. Just hang on. Good to see some names we haven't seen in a while. Mary Jo is back on. Haven't seen her in a little bit. So good to see you on. Good to see Taylor, Michigan on. I don't know who Taylor, Michigan is because, once again, depends on what stream I get it from. On the main comment screen that I've got in front of me, it shows up as Facebook user. So I'd have to actually go back onto Facebook and put that down. So good to see Mark on there. Andrew, good to see you too from Brunswick, Canada. I will answer one question about this. When we talk about the leagues, a question came in and said, first of all, do we place players? Junior Hockey Advisor and this stream that we do, Junior Hockey Live, we're not advisors, okay? Mike and I both work in the industry as development directors, and so we work at the Tier 2 level, which is the North American Hockey League. In the United States, there's Tier 1 and Tier 2. Those are the 2 free leagues, so that's like BCHL, AJHL, and the rest
USHL.
of the CJHL would be a combination of Tier 2, Tier 3 kind of. The lower end of the CJHL is kind of a Tier 3 brand, or maybe an NCDC brand, depending on how you look at it. But the question came up, do we follow all the leagues? Absolutely. We talk about all the leagues. We've talked about virtually every league out there so far this year on this broadcast. And then there's all kinds of videos you can get on. If you go to Junior Hockey Advisor and scroll through, you can find things on the CJHL. You can find it on the NUL. You can find it on the NCDC, Tier 3 hockey. We've got it. There's information out there. So feel free to grab. And when you do things, folks, if you're watching this on YouTube, hey, please subscribe. We're trying to get to that 1,000 number. That's a magic number for us. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. We sure would appreciate that. And of course, you can follow us too on our Facebook page, Junior Hockey Advisor, or the discussion group. So that'd be also nice too. Let's move on, man. Let's talk a little bit about this new NHL scouting list and break it down a little bit.
Sure. When do you want to start? You want to start with there's so much information. There's like 500 plus players on there.
Let's give a little background. Central Scouting puts out a list at the beginning of the year. I think it's in October. And they rate players A, B, and C. A being the first round guys, B being second through fourth, I think. I don't remember exactly what B and C is the later rounds. So they give you a list, and the first list that comes out is all combined. It's North America and the world. So you see players from everywhere, and it's coded. So when you're looking at the list, and I've got the old list. So this is the list. Give me a second, and let's see if I can. It's not that one. Tertiary. There we go. On the left here, that's the original list that comes up, and I'm going to bury this in a second. But you can see it's listed with the A rankings to the left of their name. The first thing you see is North America, but then it'll say international. So it's either an international player, North America, and that's their rankings. You see the A, and if I scroll through there's all the A players. There's not very many. A's are
27. I
27?
counted it. 27 A ranked players.
Yeah. And B will probably be what, about 75, 70?
Yeah, around. I didn't count them, but I think it's around 50 to 75, and then C is hundreds.
Yeah. So, and the list is very broad. You'll see names come on and come off. There were kids that we were recruiting last year that Mike and I were specifically involved in recruiting that kind of went by the wayside as the year went on. They started on the list, and they're great players. Their game didn't change. The list just develops, and sometimes the list develops away from a player. So let's put that list away, and then I'll show you the this is the current list. This is the midterm list of the rankings. Now, if you look at the names right off the top, these are very familiar names. Bedard, you heard us talk about him last week. Fantilli, we just talked about Smith a second ago. These are all pretty, these are for people that are, in the know or people that watch a lot of hockey, junior hockey. There's nobody in this top 10 that aren't names that are household names. Now, the only difference with the way they do it now is you notice that they've got North American skaters, European skaters, and the goalies broken out North American and European. That's the only way I can find the list this time. I didn't find it.
Well, they don't combine them. It's always separate. Yeah. They only do the letter grade ranking where they combine them all.
At the beginning.
So that's my biggest frustration too, because it's, it's number one, they have so many more players ranked on the North American side than the European side. But number two,
that's common.
Like, how do you know where their exact rankings are in their mind? We know Bedard is one. I think everyone knows Fantilli's two, but Will Smith, I think is somewhere.
There is an answer, Mike. There is an answer.
Well, I'm saying from their rankings.
But if anybody wants to do that, there's the consolidated ranking on Elite Prospects that'll give you a top 32 where you can see the list, and it's not much different than what we'd expect it to be. There's some more European flavor at the top, but not really. It's
Yeah, but this isn't their list. What I'm saying is I want to consolidate.
I'm saying that's not going to be far off from what their list would be, because this is kind of a concentrated list of all the different top ranking services and people out there. So the Bob McKenzie's, the TSNs, the Central Scouting, it's all kind of combined. I'm not saying it's great. McKean's is on there too, but you can look at all those individual reports. That's the thing about this is, let me get back to the list. So we got this list. There really isn't much difference between any of the services in the top 20, top 25, maybe top 40. Okay, I think it's when you get into mid-second round, late second round, Then you start looking at the list and going, oh my gosh, that guy's supposed to be a second-round pick. And as you're watching it, he drops to the third round. And then, even the announcers will be like, well, here's the guy that should be going next. And you're watching him go through the list and you're looking at all these other lists. It starts falling apart somewhere mid-second round and beyond. The first part of it, there'll be a couple guys that, flip 1 or 2, 3 spots. But it isn't much off from everybody looking at the same way on those top 20 players in the world. Do you see the same thing, Mike? Every year I watch the draft, I kind of go through it with a pencil and check off guys, and it's more of a geek thing. But that's the way
it's funny. I think maybe 2 drafts ago, in the first round, Toronto drafted a Russian player that wasn't even on the Central Scouting list at all, and they've drafted him. I think what was his name, like Arminov or something like that. They drafted in the first round, wasn't even on the Central Scouting list. And then last year, Detroit in the third round drafted another Russian player that wasn't even on the Central Scouting list either. Yeah. And then has been tearing it up in the KHL this year and the MHL and like the other leagues that they have over there. He's kind of played himself into a couple different leagues in Russia, but like you said, to start off, not all or probably few of the NHL teams actually use this as a tool. They may kind of take a look at it, but this is not what they're making their decisions off of.
Right.
And you'll see some variation between like who is the 5th best player compared to the 8th best player. But to your point, all the guys like in the top 40 are all pretty much there, give or take 1 or 2, and everybody's lists are all the same names are all there.
And that should be the way it is, because when Detroit gets down to their third round pick, and who knows if how many they got in the first round or the second round, but they get that third round pick. Now you're starting to you're trying to find things that'll suit your team. Maybe not for next year, maybe not even for the year after, but you're looking at a player that's going to fit into your system 3 years down the road. And Detroit's always been notorious for, just sucking the life out of the late rounds of the draft and picking up really good players late. And then, people kind of forget about those draft picks for 2 or 3 years, and then boom, they hit the scene and they're already coming in playing like stars. And we don't even have to go through the names like Lindstrom and, who else they got?
Datsuk, Zetterberg, Fedorov.
Fedorov, Kozlov. I mean, they've been doing it for years. So anyway, getting back to the list, here's what the USHL put out about the list. I think this is pretty interesting. Here's just some stats. 60 active players, 53 skaters, 7 goaltenders. That's the highest league amount of players that are on this draft list from any league. OHL, WHL, the Q, the BC, any league. This is the highest, and it beats their number from 57 from last year. 72 players with ties are broken down to 37, 40, 24 defensemen. That's great. It's coming off last year's draft, which saw 57 selections. The USHL now had 50 or more NHL draft picks in each of the last 5 drafts, and now has 990 NHL draft picks all time, including 4 first overall picks, which if you notice, their overall picks have just started cracking. You had 1 in 2000, but it's the 2000s when you started seeing the U.S. numbers there. But by the numbers, this is pretty impressive. 16 clubs have at least 1 player represented. 14 clubs have multiple players listed. 12 teams have tied to the midterm list are league alumni. So six from Youngstown, 5 from Green Bay, 4 from the Steel. That Youngstown number, we have close ties with the management there. No surprise there for me, just knowing how it works. No surprise with the Steel. A little bit surprised by Green Bay. Good to see them. I didn't read that right. 5 from Green Bay, Sioux Falls, Tri-City are all in there. So, but then you got a list of the names too. So, just good information across the board. This is really, it's I guess the best way to put it is, right now these draft lists are dominated by the USHL. You add the USHL with the National Development Program. There is no better league right now than that league. There is no way to argue it. There's no way to say there's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. Just to give you a little bit of the numbers on this, total CCHL, BCHL, OJ, if you take all of the CJHL teams in Canada, which is the junior A level, including the BCHL, your number is at 12, 18, 19 players, 20 players. OHL is at 61 to this list of what they say, 70?
72.
72. OHL is second at 72. The Western League, which is Canadian Major, 54. The Q, 38. That's Canadian Major. So, yeah, you could add all of the major leagues up together, and of course that would be the dominant level, is at Major Junior A. But individually, those leagues just don't hold a candle to a very relatively small league by the amount of teams. Which is
16.
16 teams. So, where do the other players come from? High school, 8 players. Prep, 8 players. The NOL, 3 players, which that's about right. AJ, OJ, BCHL. AJ, 8 players right now on the list. That's significantly high for that league, but that's Spruce Grove, that's Brooks for the most part. OJ's got 4. That's 2 to 4 is what I expect there. The BCHL, it's 6. That's hitting right in their they're in their right in their batting groove right there. I expect it to be around there. So the only
And
number
the NOL actually had 11 that were tied to the North American League. It's hard now because some of those guys have worked themselves into the USHL, but they started, this season on a NOL team. The goalie from Chippewa Steel, we talked about him after the World Junior podcast we did, the Adam Guyan, he played his whole season so far for Chippewa Steel in the North American League, and then now he's playing in the USHL. He's figured into both the USHL list and the NOL list when you look at it. So, it's one of those things where, honestly, if you look at that list, this whole list that they put out, the NHL Scouting, the one thing I can say is the World Juniors has a huge influence on their list.
Absolutely.
And when we look at those A's and B's and C's, and I forget how many total players they did their initial rankings in October, and Adam Guyan was not even on their list. And if you look at the top North American goalies, he's now 4th. So it just goes to show you how much influence that particular tournament has on their overall rankings.
Yeah, and you could go through the list. I mean, I went through it earlier today and looked at the guys that moved up or moved down on the list, and there are names that have completely dropped off. You'll also see that there's names on there that are literally just names that might be legacy names. You see a lot of that for that first list. The legacy names, what I mean by legacy names, dad's a prominent college coach, dad's a prominent college player from years ago, NHLer, a lot of, somebody that's carrying some legacy into hockey, coming in with a family background. And then those names seem to drop off. Not all of them. I saw one on there that player that played for Detroit. His dad coached in Grand Rapids for years.
Knuble.
He's still on the list, and rightfully so. He's having a good year in the USHL. But you see that a lot on the list, and so it's almost like that first list you see is almost a little bit of a vanity list where, they kind of put some names on there that may not make it, but makes people feel good. Yeah, I saw my neighbor's kid on there, Barney, and then it kind of starts solidifying after the World Juniors. So that's just the way I see it. We got a lot of new people on there. I want to say hi to Keith in San Diego. Andrew's on. Good to see you, Andrew. The list I showed, the USHL does have a section. It's the Central Scouting list. It says the title is Players with USHL Ties and the number 72 on there. Excuse me. So yeah, I did pop that on there. Um, Francisco from Chicago's on. Mike, you might be able to stop by and say hi to Francisco on your way home after your game tonight. We've got Chaz Gus Charles on from Is he on from Massapequa? Okay, I thought it was Mississauga at first. Facebook user says hi. Andrew, 72 players is correct. I'm just trying to answer some questions as we go along here too. So, hey, look, the 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 list is fun. The draft is fun. It's good to see players move up to juniors, and this is all that same process that I preach all the time with. If you want to be at this level, this is a great time to get involved in looking at these kids that are moving on to the list and then backing up and finding out how they got there. Well, it's very clear if you're a North American player, you're either in major junior A or you're in the USHL. That's right, where you're going to get the vast majority of these players coming from. Yeah, there's 8 kids from Minnesota high school that got on the list. There's none of those kids that are going straight from that list to pro hockey, okay? There's none of those kids that are going straight from that list to college hockey. Those kids will all end up playing either 1 year, 2 years in the USHL. They'll maybe jump to major junior, who knows? And then, there's some prep kids. Now, the prep kids, they're all going to be, they're pretty much going to filter into 2 programs. They're going to go BCHL or USHL, depending on what prep program they're in, and they're one and dones. Very common to see those prep kids on this list. And so if there's 8 prep kids on the list, and let's say that 8 get drafted, you're going to see them split and go up to the BCHL or go to the USHL. That's just that's the statistics that's been running that way for years. Lots of prep programs have very solid BCHL ties, and lots have USHL ties too. But it's almost a 50-50 when those prep kids come out that are very high end.
Yeah, another thing I noticed that was interesting is there were 2 forwards. There were 3 forwards on the list of kids from the Null, and 2 of those forwards started off and played about 20, 25 games in the North American League, and then left and are back playing Minnesota high school hockey. And they're on this list for, players to watch and things like that. I just thought it was interesting that they started in the North American League and then I'm sure decided because they're seniors to play for their high school and whatnot.
I don't think it was a decision that was made after they got to that Null team. I'm pretty sure they went to the Null, played a few games, maybe got 10, 15, 20 games in, and then it was intentional. They all planned on going back. There's some of those powerful Minnesota high school teams, they're getting literal looks. They're getting more. You play for the right Minnesota high school programs, you're getting more looks than a normal Null season gets, and especially if you're playing in Alaska, if you're playing in Texas. You're getting some colleges down there all the time, but you're not getting all the colleges where, there's some Minnesota high school teams that every school in Minnesota and Wisconsin and maybe even Michigan, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, are watching their home games. They're coming to all their games. So it's a different world if you're playing for one of those superstar Minnesota programs at the highest level. And once again, there's no better atmosphere than watching playoff hockey, Minnesota high school playoff hockey. Unbelievable. There's nothing better than rivalries. There's nothing better than the crowd being split down the middle with this group and this group, and and the passion and the history of it. It's a lot of fun to watch. If you haven't ever had a chance, you can watch them online. You get the sense of it, but boy, oh boy, you get chills down your spine if you go to those games live. They're a lot of fun to watch. So,
and the buildings are so cool and unique as well. It just adds to the whole atmosphere. And then obviously,
and then when you get to the finals, they get to
you're at the Excel Center.
Right, you're getting to the big boys stadium, so you get a chance to see it from there too. What other things going on, Mike? Anything else?
I mean, this is a busy time of the year, so it's just a ton of hockey, whether it's scouting or coaching, and everybody's close to getting wrapped up with the regular season. Then it starts playoffs and all of that. So obviously, from a scouting standpoint, you get to see them in high pressure situations, and it's a little bit more physical, and you get to see who's going to rise to the top and who's going to, kind of fall back to the mean. And that goes a lot into our evaluation. As a coach, we're kind of in the same boat where we're putting in a couple new installs to make us a little bit more difficult to play against, and hoping that our teams can pick it up and execute. So this is a fun time of year for a lot of different reasons. But
Do you think you're
this
on TV getting interviewed for your coaching style right now?
yeah, I do.
You pulled the
You got
playbook
to
out
put
of
everything on
we
tape.
just get the puck deep and then we change and we hope that
Nope.
everybody's
We
come
want
on.
possession. We're not getting
Come
the
on,
puck
I'm just
deep.
talking about the style, man. We got to liven this up a little bit. Let's take a question or two. All right, TM asked, "Thanks, guys. Really appreciate all the information. Any thoughts on the new Colorado Grid expansion team in the NAL? Good for the league or watering it down?" Oh, that's a great question. Go ahead, Mike.
I think it's great for the league. I think that ownership group is, committed to put a good product on the ice. I think some of the travel is going to be a little, because they're going to play in the South Division. So, Jeff and I were kind of joking about this the other day. There's some locations in the South that's going to be a challenge. If you're in Corpus Christi and you're far south Texas and you got to make a drive all the way up to Colorado, that's going to take some time to get there. But overall, is it watering it down? I don't know. That still remains to be seen. There's still some teams that struggle to field really strong teams, and they're not getting the best players. So what I think is going to happen is the top teams, there's some perennial top powerhouse teams. Those teams are still going to get all the best players for the most part. They're still going to have most of their teams advancing to Division I and things like that. And then there's going to be probably a pretty significant middle of the pack. And then there's going to be some of those bottom teams that are just going to be so much worse than like the top teams in the league that they're just not going to have a chance. So,
Well, you're absolutely right. Remember, you've got 16 teams at the USHL level, so we don't even have a 2-to-1 ratio at the NAL to the top league.
right.
So the second level down, right now, with 28 teams feeding 16, and if you look, we've covered this a lot of times on here where we actually break down the USHL and show you how many bodies come out of the NAL. There's a significant amount of players. We're talking well over 100 players every year, if not more. I can't remember what the number was. We just did this a week or two ago where we showed that list. And I'll gladly show that list again, but you can go back and grab one of other videos. When you go on to subscribe to Junior Hockey Live, when you go to YouTube, you can look at the other videos and see this. But the biggest thing about this is it's needed. People are worried about this national footprint for the NAL, and I don't really see it as a national footprint. We really don't have the West. We have the Southwest. We have central meaning from the middle, central, Midwest up through Minnesota and the
Right.
Dakotas. That area is kind of covered. And then you really don't have Michigan covered. You don't really have Ohio covered. And then everything else is over in a little pocket of the East, especially since you lost the team in Western New York that moved over to the East earlier last year. So Rochester's picking up another team. That's true, but Rochester's had an all team before. We'll see, if that lasts and how it lasts and how that forms up with the East. I would be more concerned less about the NAL's expansion and more about the NCDC's expansion. The NCDC 7 years ago used to be the EJHL, the Eastern Junior Hockey League. Now, why is that important? Because the EJHL did the exact same thing with the exact same ownerships. The owners of the EJHL teams brought on the EJHL South. The product was never intended to be at the same level. The product was intended to generate more teams that could, sell their brand as being EJHL teams, but they're EJHL South. They didn't even play the EJHL teams. They played amongst themselves. And the EJHL, for lack of another way of explaining it, just ignored them. They let the EJ South run with the brand. So now you got this NCDC West. Do you really think the NCDC West is going to be playing at the same level as the NCDC teams, which right now the product that the NCDC level has is a Division III product, sans 2 or 3 teams, and that's statistically accurate across the board. There are D1 teams, but they're only going to get 10, 12 Division I commits in that league. Do you think they're going to get 24 Division I commits because they've made it this West Division of the NCDC? Absolutely not. Do you think there'll be crossover games? Do you think the Junior Bruins or the Hitmen are going to go out and play a game in Utah? Absolutely not. Unless that Utah is going to pick up the whole tab and they're going to throw in ski tickets for the coaches and luxury hotels and a private jet, maybe. But that ain't going to happen. So
they'll probably do a showcase event where they have crossover games. But yeah, I get your point.
Yeah, so I'd be more worried about that expansion than what the Null's doing. The Null is still within the parameters of building a good structure, still within the parameters of keeping everything fairly tight. Yes, the South is going to have 9 teams as it stands. We don't know. We may see we don't sit in that executive meeting. There could be a team that's ready to fall out inside of the Null division. It's happened before. We might see a team drop out somewhere else where these new teams are filling in. It's not uncommon to see 2 come on and 1 come off over the years. So,
yeah.
But I'm not too worried about the Null's expansion. I'd be more really concerned about people understanding what the NCDC West means, because there's going to be a lot of confusion on that where people think, oh, I got a tender from an NCDC team. Yikes. Okay. Yeah. Be careful. Just be careful. It's not the same. NCDC product versus NCDC West is going to be completely different hockey.
Yeah, and I think, my biggest, I guess, fear is more and more and more Tier 3 junior teams that keep popping up everywhere. There's new teams within leagues. There's new leagues that are joining. And with them being all pay to play, a lot of these people that start owning these teams or starting these teams are not in it necessarily for the right reasons, which is to help advance players. It's more a moneymaker for them and, a career for them and different things like that. So they're worried about themselves and not the kids. And when you're in the Null, you're, those coaches are trying to get somewhere, but they're also having to get their players somewhere. And that's, if you're winning all the time, but you're not advancing your players, a lot of the good players aren't going to want to come and play for your program.
Absolutely.
Because they want to advance and they want to get a scholarship.
Sorry, Bloomer. I jumped you too quick there. Mark says, hello from New Zealand. Very insightful. Sons in the EHL, and we're very curious about how to do it right in the USA. Well, first of all, you're doing it right by watching this podcast. Hopefully we can give you some good insight. Go to our website, subscribe to Junior Hockey Advisor to get all the content. I knew those posters you were doing, the Men of Hockey posters you were doing down in New Zealand, were going to pay off for us, Bloomer. Those bathing suit edition.
Yeah. That must have been 10, 15 years ago.
You were Mr. May, weren't you?
October.
You're October? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see if we got any other questions here. I thought I saw a couple more here. Okay. How about the NCDC West, and what do you think the states out there in the West will catch up to the players coming out of them? I wish I would have saw this. I'd have thrown it up before I went on that rant. I don't have to say anymore. It's going to be 2 different products. It's going to be a product which is the NCDC, and then it's going to be the NCDC West. Could they convince a few good players to play in the West? It'll be short-lived. They'll be short-lived because they'll see that there's no correlation between that league and Division I hockey. It'll be short-lived because they'll look at who's on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th lines. No, it's not the same product. It is absolutely not the same product, and that will be proven out over the next few years. Now, doesn't mean that there's not some great places to play in the West. Some of those stadiums they play in are unbelievable. Some of those towns are really fun hockey towns, get good crowds, and it's a good experience. We from our Tier 3 team a few years ago, we'd see guys jump from our team to go play out in one of the Western State Leagues team just because excuse me, they knew their hockey career was going to be playing ACHA hockey or low level Division III hockey. So they said, "Oh, I'll go have fun," and they'd go out and they'd live in the West Coast. They'd see the mountains. They'd ski. They'd do all the fun things out there and had a little more fun with it. There's nothing wrong with that. So, you got anything to say on that?
Well, I mean, I don't understand if they have the mindset, they meaning the NCDC, if they have the mindset that by them taking on the Western States League's teams and rebranding it as the NCDC, but they're all still playing against each other, how are they going to say or show that it is to the level of the NCDC? You know, they'd have to gut the whole team on all of their teams and then somehow find other players to come in that are of the NCDC ability to take on those spots. It's just impossible to do. And
Right.
you know, the biggest perk for the actual NCDC is the fact that most of those kids get committed when they're 15 and 16 for a Division I school.
Yep.
And instead of them going, you know, they're not USHL players, but they're at the ability of the North American League. And instead of them leaving home to go play for a North American League team in Texas or
Or they'll stay closer to home, right?
or somewhere else, they stay close to home
Yep.
and they, you know, play for whatever the program is in the
They'll play
NCDC.
for Providence or Boston College, BU.
Yeah.
There's going to be 30, 40, 50 kids that are D1 kids that are already pre-committed. We're not saying they don't have commits.
That's what props their league up is
Right.
the fact that those kids stay
But
because
when
they
you
don't have
talk
to
about
go anywhere else.
fresh commitments, getting a commitment in hand, a fresh commitment, you'll get 2 teams, 3 teams in the NOL in the East League. In the East is not known for being the strongest of the divisions, although they do have the defending national champion right now. They'll have more commitments in 2 or 3 teams than the whole NCDC has as a league. And, you'll get some teams in the South or a couple teams in the Midwest that maybe one team has as many fresh commitments as the whole league has. So very interesting on that. Let's see, we got a couple of questions here. Here's a interesting one. Mike, why don't you take this one? This one says, what are your thoughts on a 17-year-old playing New England Prep versus NCDC?
Well, I'd have to know what NCDC team you'd be playing on. I think both are good options, but this is where I get into my depends route because I need to know what's the prep school, what's the NCDC team that he could play on to have a better understanding of what I think the best route is. But the reality is for any kid, they have to be able to play and they have to perform. So if that means playing for your New England prep school team, for forward, you're a top 6 forward, you're on the power play, penalty kill, all that. You know, you need to be able to play to continue to develop. If you can do that at the NCDC and you're on one of the top programs that does get players committed, or there are null teams that end up drafting or tendering kids from those programs, and now you got a better opportunity to get a Division I scholarship by going over to the null, maybe that's the route.
Yeah, and Stephen, you can do another thing too, and this is, of course, there's opinion, speculation. This is not a straight objective answer because there's so many things that can be factored into this. But straight up, reverse engineer the 2 teams. You mentioned that it's Kent School and it's Utica. Just reverse engineer it. Look at pull up elite prospects, pay the $7 a month or whatever they charge you, and go back through players and follow their history back and see where they came from, and see where they come after they leave Utica. Do players from Utica bounce around to 3 or 4 leagues? Do they all go to D3? Is there a D1 route there? And look at Kent too, and look at how many kids are committing coming out of Kent every year. And you can even go to each one of their websites because both those programs, if you scroll through their history on their website, they're going to announce every D1 kid that they get committed that is on their roster. So you can look over the last couple of years and see how many they're claiming and figure this out pretty easy. I have an opinion, but I don't want to offend either one of those programs. In general terms, elite prep is going to open the door to elite juniors. And the question is do you feel that Utica is elite juniors? And if you do, maybe that's a good choice. If you don't think that Utica is elite juniors, then you have to ask yourself: do you get stuck in a rut if you go play in the NCDC? Is it tougher to get out of the NCDC when you're there? Yes, it is. It's very tough to get out of the USPHL or the EHL or the NCDC to get into the USHL or to get into the NOL once you're there, because now you got to prove against everybody that you're on one of the top players in that league. So there's less forgiveness. A U18 player or a prep player gets a lot more forgiveness for not being the top player and still can move into the NOL or the USHL off of potential than a player that's already playing in the NCDC. Hopefully.
Yeah, and sometimes you get yourself in a scenario too where because you're young, you're only 17, sometimes you're kind of buried on the roster just because that team has to play some of their older players because it's their responsibility to have them show well so that they can get committed. And it's kind of like you're paying your dues because once you get to that, you'd want that ice time if you were in your last year of eligibility of junior. So, again, if your kid is an absolute stud and he's on the first or second line because he's just that good, that's a different scenario. But, that's
Yep.
where you got to kind of understand what those options are. And to Jeff's point, if you go to elite prospects and you try to reverse engineer where the different players are coming from, that's all based on the transaction reports of those programs. So there's no room for opinions or somebody to kind of fudge the numbers a little bit. That's exactly what happened is what they're showing you there.
Thanks, Mike. Can I go on to the next
I
question?
just say it better.
Okay. Do USHL and NOL teams factor in a player's grades in high school?
Yes.
Mike?
Yeah, definitely. Because, again, all these coaches want to win. We know that they want to win championships, but really the other piece that is really important for their programs is advancing players. So if you have a player with a low GPA, if you look at a lot of these NCAA Division I colleges that have hockey, they all are pretty academically prestigious in many cases. So if you got a 2.5 GPA and you basically lop off 50% of the schools, you're not going to even be able to get into because of your grades. So, they want to have kids with high grades. It's also valuable for teams if they don't have to give you an athletic scholarship, and they may be able to give you an athletic scholarship because your grades are so high.
Academic.
Did I say athletic twice?
Yes.
Oh,
Well,
they can give
it's
you
okay.
an academic scholarship instead of an athletic
when you're
scholarship.
going
Then they
down
can
the
give
wrong
money to somebody
when you're
else.
going down the wrong path, it's easy to keep making the same mistake again. I disagree totally. If you're a good enough hockey player, they'll find a way to make you a college hockey player. The truth is, the majority, Mike is completely right. Bloomer's right on the path. If you're an average college hockey player and you're middle to the bottom of the pack, I there's no doubt about it. The only reason my daughter was recruited and wanted at Yale is because she was a 4.0 student. She was told she would sit for 2 years before she saw the ice, or she would, practice and maybe dress for games, but she'd see limited ice for 2 years until things opened up and she continued to improve. But they wanted the grade point, so it's an offsetting thing. If you're going to play at an Ivy, grade point means a lot if you're an average player, because you can literally get on a roster because of your grade point, because they play with it's a little bit more of a complex system in the Ivy. Grade points as a team have to be held at a certain standard, so they do have grade point players on their teams. That's for Ivy schools. Now, you go to any other school, there's always a school of kinesiology on every campus, major campus. So you can always get into one of the easier programs in a college and get a degree. And, no offense to anybody with a kinesiology degree, but it's not chemistry, and you're not in the engineering school, and you're not taking advanced rocket science classes. If you're really good, most players that at the superstar level, like that list that we were looking at, those A-graded players, they're going to be there 1 or 2 years. All they have to do is pass the first year, The second year, they don't even have to. They can enroll, and by the time the semester's over, they can be on probation and not even play this, not even go to any classes the second. That's what happens in the NBA all the time. These guys are one and dones out of Kentucky. They don't even go to class. They don't even try to go to class. So I'm not saying that's the way of hockey, because hockey has the highest standards of any sport. Our GPA always leads the NCAA in every sport. I'm just saying that if you're really good, they're going to get you in. And remember, it's not GPA, it's GPA, and it's the clearinghouse. So you've got your ACT, SAT score, and your GPA. And if one's high, the other one can be lower, and vice versa. So I'm not in full agreement there, Mike, because of the top. I agree with you on the bottom, but not on the top.
Yeah, but that's such a small percentage that, they're great. Honestly, the majority of the guys that are at the top that have, not the greatest GPAs or test scores, they end up going the major junior route of Canada. They're not going to
That
go
could be
the
true.
college route.
Yep, that could be true, but some do. Some do. Even in my
Yeah.
alma mater, there's some guys that get there that, their knuckles drag a little bit lower than the rest of us. So it does happen. So
I
let's see
know. I'm
those.
looking at one.
Yeah, yeah. You got a mirror there, or what do you? Okay, here's a good question. Strongest division in the Null. Boomer, you got it.
Hands down, the South. And I don't say that because we're
Biased.
affiliated with a team in the South, but the reality is more kids get committed out of the South. That's one feather in the cap for that division. And then the other big factor is that usually a team that's battling for the Robinson Cup at the end of the year is a team from the South, and typically it's going to be Lone Star, it's going to be Shreveport, it's going to be at the time Amarillo. There's a lot of teams that are always constantly
Yeah.
battling for it. New
Well,
Mexico last year.
3 out of the last 5 cups have come from the South. That's just one way to look at it. The defending champion last year was still Lone Star because of the pandemic year. So yeah, the South is extremely tough. Look at the scores of the top 4 teams. They're usually 1-goal games, a lot of overtimes. Yes, the bottom 1 or 2 teams struggle, but that's there's what do we have now? 7 teams, 8 teams in the South.
I think there's 8.
Yeah, so there's no doubt about it. There's good teams in each division, but the South is easily the toughest division. So
there's characteristics about each of the different divisions, but the South is usually bigger, heavier. There's more structure. It's more college-like, which is why a lot of colleges look for the teams within the South and take their players.
Yeah, so we got. I don't see many other questions. We'll take this as our last one. We just broke over an hour, and Mike's got to get to his game. My son plays Junior B in Canada. How does this compare to the NA3 or to the NCDC? Once again, there's a comparison. 2 players came out of the GOJO, the Greater Ontario Junior Hockey League, which is Junior B, that's on that NHL scouting list. This last one, the midterm scouting list. So, clearly there's good players. We've scouted. We scouted a player last year pretty hard out of the GOJO, and I only use that because that's really close to where I live, and it's easy for me to watch that league. There's competent hockey, but it tends to be a feeder for the OHL. Really, really young players that end up moving into the OHL that are your top players coming out of that league. And then the other players tend to be players that are, riding out their career playing Junior B in Canada. There's nothing wrong with the structure of the leagues. There's nothing wrong with the coaching. It just tends to be probably very close to the NA3. The NA3 is going to get more kids into Division III college hockey only because there's more kids that want to go play Division III. Excuse me. More kids that want to go play Division III out of that league, specifically because of the fact that it's in the States. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that's hopefully you're using it as a stepping stone to get to the higher league, and that's really what somebody in the NA3 should be doing as well. That's what somebody in the NCDC in many cases should be doing also. but you're going to get kids like we talked about earlier from the NCDC that are, Division One talent and get commitment into Division One. You're not going to see that in the NA3, and it's going to be tough to see it coming from Junior B right out of one of those programs. But there's kids that played Junior B and moved up to Major Junior or somewhere else, another higher league, and got their opportunity from there. So I would say it's probably fairly comparable to the NA3.
Very good. Hey, we made it through. I didn't cough every time I talked, so that was a plus for tonight. Mike, good luck in your game tonight. Thank you for everybody.
Thank you
for jumping in tonight and participating. Great questions. You can find more information on Junior Hockey Advisor. Please go to our page. Now I'm gonna start coughing. Please go to Junior Hockey Advisor, the YouTube page. Subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of the family there. Junior Hockey Advisor discussion. We'd love you to have the part of the family there too. And it's extremely important to realize that we're not advisors. We're just here trying to give you information, and we'd love to see you Sunday night. I'm going to break down, and Mike, if you want to come on and help host it, jump on Sunday night if you want to. We're going to talk about the state of players looking to get into juniors right now. Where are your action plans? What should you have on your action plan? What should you be doing right now if you want to be playing in the USHL, the BCHL, the MJHL, the NCDC, the NAL, wherever you're trying to get to? What should you be doing right now? That'll be Sunday's topic. Look forward to having you jump in on Sunday. Thank you, everybody. Mike, good luck tonight. Here the over-under is you guys are a -2. So you better be a 2 or 3 goal win so I don't lose on my Vegas line on this, okay?
Now that I know you bet it against us, stranger things can happen.
There you go, man. There you go. All right, folks. Take care. Have a good night.
Take care, everyone.